Welcome to Serenity Wealth Now with Chris Cooper. This is not your typical financial radio show. As a licensed CPA, insurance agent, and investment advisory representative, Chris coaches his clients on a holistic view of financial well-being with an objective of providing a complete financial strategy to fund life's goals. Chris is here to guide you down the path to the financial serenity you deserve. Now, here's Chris Cooper.
All right, good morning. So today we are going to have an interesting topic. We're going to talk a little bit about some behind-the-scenes things that take place within local governments and also national governments, right? We have a lot that goes on in our political environment, and there's a lot of things that take place behind the scenes, and those behind the scenes actions sometimes go unnoticed. So joining us in studio, well, kind of remote, in our remote studio today, we have Karl. Karl, your company is Lobbyit, am I right?
That's correct. Lobbyit, formerly Lobbyit.com, makes it quite easy to find if you're looking for a lobbyist, but
yeah.
Happy to join. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So lobbyists. So tell me a little bit about, we always hear lobbyists from time to time, but I got to tell you, I don't think a lot of us really know what it is that you do and how you help, what goes on in our government. But I know that there's a critical role there.
No one really knows. I think I get that question a lot.
Do you know, though? Because as long as you know, I think we're good.
Every day is different, which is one of the joys. But despite folks not knowing, it is the only profession I think that ranks lower than actual politicians in terms of approval. So they know enough to not like it.
But part of your job is to help improve that, right?
I guess so.
At least on the politician side, probably at your expense, I think. I think
probably they would see us as a necessary evil, which is kind of where is probably a good spot in terms of a lawmaker's perspective, because we are kind of beating down their door with messages from folks who have very important issues they care about, and whether it's trade associations and some business interests, or individuals with a personal problem on like a visa or something like that. All of our clients or folks that hire us, that's the most important issue in the world to them, and so we make sure that they hear about it and take action. And so that can be, if someone's ever knocked on your door every day before an election day comes up, that's probably how they're feeling when we're kind of at their doors all the time. So essentially,
who hires a lobbyist, Karl?
Everyone. I mean, if I think. So my current client list kind of runs the gamut from big trade associations with companies that you would be very familiar with, to a couple of Fortune 500 companies, to small startups and nonprofit associations and individuals and city and county governments that have issues before kind of the federal government. So I mean, anyone that has something that they're concerned about or a problem that needs fixing, we are there to help you. So it could be, looking for more funding, or, more access to research, or, having, a certain tax credit put in place, or,
I like tax credits, Karl. Let's focus on those.
A lot of work right now. I mean, the tax bill is kind of the next big thing here, as long as trade finds its way out of the way. But so that's a very active piece right now, and people have financial and personal interests, and so the short answer is pretty much everybody.
So essentially, if I'm thinking about this correct, I vastly oversimplify. So I do that in what I do from a financial perspective as well, because I think we need to just take the noise out of things that are complicated and make it more simplified, right? So essentially, your job is you work with clients, you find people that have things that they think that the governments need to be focused on, and your job is to help bring that to the attention of folks in the legislative, I assume mostly on the legislative side of things.
It's both pretty legislative and regulatory. I think, the growth of, the executive and all the agencies over the last 50 years has mean there's a lot of work there. And frankly, when it comes to businesses looking for, whether it's some sort of federal grant program funding, or being part of a research kind of contracting opportunity, the federal government has set up offices within those agencies to basically be, support for folks that are interested in those programs. And so there's a lot of places to go, but not a lot of information on how to get there. And so that's why folks hire us. We're kind of part
Sure.
tour guide, part salesperson. I think is probably the easiest place to put it. For our clients, we help them figure out why, it's important to meet with certain people, whether it's a committee chair or someone who, had a personal story that is tied to their issues from when they were before they were elected to Congress. And so finding that roadmap and kind of translating how the largesse of Washington works to them, but then being a salesperson for them to the government. And that's what we're selling is a policy or kind of an idea, not necessarily, although sometimes, a product. And so it's, going and making phone calls over and over again, changing your pitch and your tune depending on what the reaction is. Sometimes doing the same meeting 10 times before you get the right answer, but knowing that it's there.
You're telling me the government takes hearing the things multiple times in order to see? That surprises me.
Yeah. So it's a lot of what I do is probably best equitable to a sales job.
Yeah. Okay. So I got to ask. So young Karl Stark's going to school, understanding what he wants to be in life. Did you always say at the age of 10, "Hey, I want to be a lobbyist"? How do you get into this?
I would probably say no. My parents would probably say yes.
Okay.
I've always been involved and interested in politics. I think I got my first paid political job was doing a local Republican state representative race when I was 19, when I was coming back from college one summer, which was knocking on doors all day and, going to local groups and endorsements and things like that. And from there, just kind of kept in touch with people. I mean, the networking and, making sure that you follow up with folks who work in what you're interested in is a real thing, because that's how I got an internship in the 2009 financial crisis, which was when I graduated, and had to work on an internship on that front for 18 months. And from there, just kind of stayed put.
So it's really having an interest in the political science kind of arena, or politics in some form or fashion.
That was the story for me. I think one of the great things that I find about the industry is that that's not the story for everyone. I've had people that have been, I spent 10 years working for a national labor union for public employees, and a lot of the folks in the labor movement that are lobbyists were line workers. And then elected president, and then are now in D.C. doing kind of what I do. There are some folks who have PhDs in microbiology who find their way as subject matter experts, and then are now doing what I do. So some of it's politics, but we get folks from kind of all walks of life that come through, and the part of the also joy about DC is we get folks from all over the country no matter what, because they have
it's the hot spot for this, right?
Send folks here. Well, and you've also always got to have folks from Alaska, right? Because they have members of Congress. You've always got to have folks from Wyoming, and so you get that kind of cross mix of folks who all care about what they're doing, but are a pretty diverse set.
Yeah. Now, are you from DC originally?
Nope. I was born in Texas, lived in Arkansas for a bit, but was mostly raised in Michigan. So
okay, gotcha. So a little bit all over the place, but what is going on? So now you're in DC, raising family in DC. What's the environment for, we're in the middle of the country here, Midwest. So what's the environment in DC? Because quite frankly, a lot of what I see is just what's on the national news. And I don't know that those outlets are always telling exactly the real fair story all the time either. So
yeah, they're probably not. I mean, there's certainly a show that gets put on for, the cable news and general public, and even, some of what they're doing is communicating with each other through those interviews and sound bites. So it's certainly a charade, but one that's necessary. There is a whole, network of work that goes on apart from that entirely, right? So, we have current local government that is looking to, transform and repurpose some of their local post office, and so they need help with that. And we have another person who's looking at some visa things. Let's see, we've got, a couple of clients who, working on cyber security, which has been a pretty
important deal.
Through line for about 15 years now when it comes to the federal government in terms of what they're working on. So a lot of that work is ongoing. That doesn't get reported on because it's not interesting, and that's the part of our job. That's,
unfortunately,
that's not interesting when you go and you're taking meetings over and over again about grain standards on this and things like that. And if you've got something that if you're making a product or working in a research field or whatever it is you're doing, they're doing something here that is affecting you. It might be going slower than it would have been otherwise, but it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Right. Now, you mentioned a little bit about some of the things that you've seen from a political climate going on in Washington. Taxes is something that I talk to a lot of people about, reducing our partnership with the government. Tax Cut and Jobs Act was put in place 2018, set to expire at the end of this year. I've been telling a lot of my clients, hey, Donald Trump put that Tax Cut and Jobs Act into place in his first term. Will likely be pushing towards extension of that in some time, I think this year, and with the both the House and the Senate under that Republican control at this point in time, I would think that that's going to be something that's coming up on the agenda here and getting a decent amount of support. What are your thoughts on that pretty significant piece of legislation?
The House just kind of did a procedural step to advance the Senate's budget to kind of move this whole ball forward. They need to kind of wrap it all up in that before September 30th. So that is probably true, with the big caveat that oftentimes when things seem to make sense in Washington is when they kind of fall apart. We've seen that a little bit already, and we saw it with the Biden administration, and we saw it with the Obama administration as well. That when there's unified kind of government, there's more room for the individuals in those parties to, go out more on a limb, or maybe try to, take their opportunity to exact something, and it slows down some of the process. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, kind of what the market looks like and the trade stuff looks like, kind of going forward, because this administration is really not doing things conventionally when it comes to anything from what the balance of tax rates might be between business and individual versus what they're looking at, last time around, or whether or not it'll be a balanced budget is really going to be a concern for this go around. And it sounds like that's really where the fight is kind of right now. And so that's going to be, I think that remains to be seen how all that kind of fits together.
Interesting.
The good news, I guess, for folks following it is that anything that doesn't get there's a hard September 30th deadline for their kind of big overall package that has to happen, but anything that that's tax related doesn't get included in that, there's plenty of time before the election, which is probably the deadline for the politicians in Washington in terms of getting it done to try to get an extension on that done. But
I know that's a big hot topic. And I know that's a big objective for the administration, so I think it's going to be coming. But I think it was the immigration, it was getting some of that stuff done was his top priority, and so now he's kind of moving towards that other arena, which I think has got some good potential. You mentioned the debt thing. I'm always concerned about that because it is continuing to escalate. So, so talk to me a little bit about some of the other things that you've got going on that are that our viewership would like to hear about.
Yeah, so I mentioned we've got some clients who are individuals. One of those things we're working on right now is some budget language to create a pilot program. There was 4 or 5 years ago some federal guidance put out on best practices for tracking sexual assault kits because, and if you've read the news probably about every week, you can see that states just do not track these things. They'll open up storage area and find 10,000, unused tested kits from back in the day. And so, there was a concerted bipartisan effort to put in best practices with chain of custody and tracking of all these things, and federal government spending from the Department of Justice to help states kind of put these things through. And as of right now, very few of them have. And so,
really?
A couple of legislative efforts from members of Congress. Representative Cleaver had a bill a couple Congresses ago. There was a bill in last Congress as well that kind of didn't go anywhere. And so a lot of the work that gets done now, I think is done on the federal budget side of things because Congress passes so few big pieces of legislation anymore. And so putting language in the budget, which has the force of action, makes those agencies carry out programs the way they're to be intended. So what we're now trying to do is create a pilot program to get the private sector involved, get these states to get brought up to speed and meet the guidance they're supposed to be meeting.
Well, it seems interesting to me that we have a victim of a assault of any kind. You mentioned sexual assault specifically, but any crime, there should be a chain of custody that has the evidence put into place to make sure that we can convict the people accordingly and not have some kind of legal show take place that allows somebody to get away with something and not face the ramifications. So that just kind of surprises me a little bit.
And that's what the federal government says, and that's what states should be doing, and they have money to do it, and money has been doled out to help them set up these programs. Some of them have, but a lot of them haven't.
Now, this is at both a national and a local level then, state level as well?
Some states, Missouri passed a law a few years ago to get this up to speed. There have been a handful of states that have done a pretty good job. I think Texas has gotten theirs out the door, New Jersey as well. But our efforts at the federal government, because they have, some $10-20 million that they have put towards this effort to create a unified standard. I mean, if you commit the crime in Missouri and Kansas or Iowa doesn't have, a standard, and you want to cross that over to commit your next crime, it's going to make it a lot harder for those agencies to, bring justice to those victims, right? So
that doesn't seem like that makes a lot of sense, Karl.
Yeah, is important, and that's why it was, these guidelines were put in place a couple of years ago.
So
one of the issues is getting, and so it means is someone paying attention? I mean, part of a lot of the work, that we do is, if someone's breaking the law or acting out of guidance, I mean, that happens every day, right? The speed limit's 25 on my street. People are going 30 and 40 all the time. Doesn't mean that they're going to get in trouble every time for it. Someone's not enforcing that law.
Right.
Until, someone cares enough to do it, right? You see the parents organize or to put a cop on the street, and then the law hasn't changed, but the enforcement has. And so getting the attention in Washington to enforce the laws that have already been written is a lot of the work as well, and that's what we're trying to do here.
Well, it sure seems logical. I mean, if a crime is committed, I want to make sure that there's not a legal manner in which, just because of some loophole or chain of custody that got broken on some evidence, that something take place where somebody just is able to, not do the time, so to speak, right? It seems like this should be a very much an overwhelming, just obvious thing to pass. So I'm surprised that we don't have this, quite frankly.
We had a bill in the last Congress that I think had 30-some co-sponsors, which is more than ever before. But the bad
that's good.
In Congress is that it usually takes 7 years for something to get through, from the first day it's introduced to the day that it's signed. And that's why
I assumed governments were more efficient than 7 years, Karl.
Yeah, it's a pretty slow go here. I mean, I think it gets slower as you go higher up the ladder.
That was sarcasm.
Slower as you go higher up the ladder.
Absolutely. No, it's just crazy to me how long things take. But, there's a lot of people involved and there's a lot of dynamics involved. And anytime you have that, it's a challenge, right?
Right, and then things get in the way, right? I mean, the president wants to focus on tariffs for right now, and so a lot of the folks that's the same in Congress. That's the same committee that works on taxes and the budget, right? It's all Ways and Means and Senate Finance. So if they have the work gets put on pause for a little bit, or they find another person to work on it, and so we find new people to kind of pay attention to it. But it's always keeping the attention, engagement, and urgency on the issues.
Well, I don't know. On this issue, I could see President Trump, I could almost hear his speech on this issue, talking about assault victims and making sure they're protected from the evil gangs and things like that along the way. So it's just, I can almost picture the speech right now.
Fix this now, right? Yeah, no, absolutely. It's part of the issue has been traditional political power centers that the administration has shown it's willing to completely go up against if there's a problem in front of them. So certainly we're very excited about our prospects here with the new administration. Well,
good. I sure hope that something takes place on this one, because I would hate to, and I know there's plenty of stories. In fact, I've talked to a few that have seen some challenges and some, been victims and have not seen the justice. Unfortunately, it happened. Those personal scars are always going to be there. But at least from the justice system, seeing bad people put behind bars and seeing the ramifications, I think that we should all be wanting to support that.
Yeah.
So,
create more work for someone else down the line, right?
Right. And this seems like something that I want my government involved in. I do not, Karl. I want a smaller government. I've always been a big believer in that, and I'm sure a lot of other people are as well. But there are certain things that we want to make sure our governments do help us with, and safety is probably top one on that list, right? And immigration falls under that, national security, border control, and that police presence is part of that. Some of that's obviously at a local level, but nationally as well.
Yeah, we want government to do some of the things that we can't do for ourselves, and tracking evidence is not something an individual victim should have to do for themselves. So it's
absolutely not. We need to put resources into our federal spending. I look at our federal budget a lot, and that's why I get concerned about tax risk in the future and the amount of the mountain of national debt we have. But I sit here and I look at things and programs like this, and this is what I want my government focusing on. I don't want them focusing on everything, but this is a good one.
Spending all this money, where has it been going? Because they're not holding states accountable to the standard, and they're not getting the program up and running. So let's get the private sector involved that already has this fix already out there, right?
So the fix to this already exists. It's out there to help the tracking and traceability. Yep. And is it just a cumbersome solution? Is that why people aren't doing it today?
It's not a cumbersome solution. It just is a matter of doing the process the right way.
Okay.
We have, and usually the private sector has got that figured out.
Private sector, I could see, would be more efficient than the government. No
And
offense to our politicians and friends.
So in terms of getting it set up, there's a lot of red tape that has existed, and we're, having, the president and Congress fix a lot of that so that we can, bring these partners in-house to get it done.
Well, this just makes sense. I talk a lot about how we can make sure our government, our tax dollars, right, are being spent wisely. And in today's environment, right, with all the Doge nonsense and all that conversation, I shouldn't say nonsense, because I'm just glad that it's been talked about for 20 plus years, holding the government accountable for spending our monies wisely. It's nice to hear those kind of actions, or see those actions actually being taken, so.
Yeah, no, it has been good. There's, and
there's going to come with bads too, right?
But, well, I think it's having some investigation, or looking at how we've done this, is a good process in and of itself. Yeah. So much of it has just been, here's how we have done it. Don't look under that rock. Don't challenge whatever this program award is, and that's where we have a lot of inefficiency, and fraud comes in those places, right? I mean, it's important to do due diligence on a regular basis, as any accountant does.
Well, I think that this to me is a great initiative that you're supporting here. I appreciate you bringing it to people's attention, and I really hope folks, some good things happen and get some traction on it. So, where can people learn more about this issue and make sure that they give some support to it?
Sure. So there's currently a legislation from last year from Nancy Mace, representative from South Carolina, has done a lot of good work on it. The federal resource, the office that's supposed to be tracking it, is the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative at the Department of Justice. But if you are kind of looking for, ways to get involved in this effort, there are a couple of nonprofits and foundations that do some of this work as well.
That's good to hear. So good to hear. So, Karl, thank you so much. I got to ask, man, what does a lobbyist do in their spare time?
Spare time. Let's see. I would be trying to get out on the golf course if we weren't having our cold front in. So I'm living vicariously through the.
It's happening soon. We're April. We're getting there. It's gonna change. So.
Yeah. Well, other than that, just hanging out with the family, the kid here, and doing everything our wonderful city has to offer. The other great part about DC is we have a lot of museums, and they are all free.
Yeah, well, that's kind of cool. Yeah, another nice little thing that we want to see happen and stay that way. So awesome.
Well, Karl, of access here.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been awesome, very informative. I'm sure that your conversations on a personal level and a work level intertwine, quite frankly, all the time. So I think it's really cool. Thanks for doing good work, supporting good things, and I look forward to seeing a lot of great initiatives that you're supporting throughout to make our country better.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris.
All right, so we think about a lobbyist, right? What does a lobbyist do? A lobbyist is basically behind the scenes helping to make things happen, helping to negotiate things that happen, right? There's a lot that goes into the government, right? I love the idea of a small government. I love the idea that less is more. But at the same point in time, I think everyone agrees we need some type of governmental structure, something to do some of those basic necessities, those things that are important to us, that we need done to protect our nation, to protect our goals, to protect our objectives, and to protect our citizens, right? And that's some of the things that a lobbyist does get involved in, right? And so one of the things that Karl was talking about specifically relates to sexual assault victims, right? Those are things that involve public safety. Public safety is something that I believe we want to make sure the government has resources to do so in an efficient manner, right? Protect our safety. It's an important governmental function, right? It exists on a national level and on a local level. I've done a little bit of research on the state of Missouri, where home based is, and there's a lot of legislation out there. There's been a lot of support for a more efficient tracking system for sexual assault victims, sexual assault kits, and quite frankly, any chain of custody matter really should. I mean, this is pretty much common sense, right? We want to make sure that tracking exists in our country to ensure victims get the legal recourse they deserve, right? They didn't deserve what happened to them. That's a terrible crime that took place. We want to make sure those responsible are held accountable. And that is something I want my government to spend some time, effort, and energy doing to make sure we protect. There is some conversation about going on in the state of Missouri. There's actually some legislation that has overwhelming support. But is it being done in the most efficient way possible? That's ultimately a question I have, because when I think of governmental resources, I also want it to be done efficiently, right? That's how we make sure that we hold our taxpayer dollars to be spent on things that make sense for us. Safety is a big one, but we want it to be done efficiently as well. And I'm not quite sure I'm seeing a lot of efficiency in that manner. So I think of our government as a fiduciary, right? They have an obligation to do what's in our best interest, right? In my industry, that's the term that people throw out there, fiduciary, a legal obligation to do what's in your best interest. Well, folks, I am a fiduciary, legally obligated to do what's in people's best interest. But you know what? That doesn't mean that's why I want people to do business with me. I don't like that thing. I am a fiduciary. I have a legal obligation to do it. That's terrible to say, right? You want to work with folks that do things because it's the right thing to do. And politicians do a good job of saying that kind of stuff. We want to make sure we hold them accountable to doing the right thing, because not only are they legally obligated to, but because they're good people, because they believe in what they're doing, and because they want to help. Those are the things that we focus here at Serenity Wealth on, is making sure we hold ourselves to a higher standard, not a fiduciary standard. I am a fiduciary. I get it. That's great. Yes, I'm held to that standard because probably some lobbyist said that that's something we need to put into a bill, right? But before that, people just need to be doing what's in people's best interest, understanding goals, understanding objectives, understanding the why, and doing things to help people in the most efficient way possible. It exists in my business. It's why I get to know everybody when I get to meet them. I bring people in. We have a casual, fun conversation. We talk about life. Sure, life gets funded by financial goals, right? We have to understand those things. But it's really more about life. It's about goals. It's about expectations. It's about what we're trying to achieve. That's what really matters to people. And that is formed through relationships and understanding the things that make a difference for individuals. So feel free, check us out online, SerenityWealthNow.com. Give us a call, set up some time. Love to chat and talk about how we can help you and your situation. Until next time, hope you enjoy and get the financial serenity you deserve.
Serenity Now! This is Serenity Wealth Now with Chris Cooper. Request a free copy of Chris's latest book, The New Holistic Retirement, by visiting SerenityWealthNow.com.
Investment advice offered through Fortis Capital Advisors, LLC.